For months now, my life has been completely absorbed by the Yakuza series. Every day I wake up and the first thing I do is check on my real estate business or my confectionery company, and each night I hit the town singing karaoke, getting drunk, and beating people up. Which is a lie, because I've not really played any of them recently, but anyway, running around the iconic streets of fake Japan fills me with this deep desire to one day visit the real Japan and see how it all compares. So I flew like 7,500 kilometers, which for you Imperial viewers is 1,000,000 miles, all the way to Japan just so that I could make this video, and definitely not for any other reason, tax department. Now, it's known to many at this point that the locations in the Yakuza / Like a Dragon games are lovingly recreated from real life locations, so if you live in those areas and visit them in-game, or if you practically live in those games and visit them in real life, it'll feel like the only thing that's changed is who you're controlling. But before I start comparing locations, and for the most part appreciating the incredible attention to detail of these games, I'd just like to say a couple things. First of all, I'm no photographer or videographer or anything. My only professional equipment is my phone and a crappy tripod I got off Amazon, and I also have done everything in my power not to show my face so that the food you're eating right now doesn't get thrown back up. So my footage is about as professional as something a high school student would do for an assignment in a class he's failing. I will upload an unlisted video that compiles some of my good footage from my recent trip that just shows some of the ambience of Japan, all captured in 4K HDR because I did manage to get at least some footage that I think is rather lovely, so that'll be in the description down below. But anyway, I also have an Australian accent and am very likely going to mispronounce names and words because English is a completely different language to Japanese. And to that I say that a majority of you can't say aluminium correctly, and Japanese people couldn't even comprehend the word velvet, so just pretend I said every word properly. Anyway, it's time to be like our favorite protagonist Kiryu and head to the most famous of locations, the one and only Kamurocho. Known in real life as kabukicho, according to Google Translate's text-to-speech, named as such because there was going to be a kabuki theater a long time ago, but that never happened, and yet the name stuck. Hence Kabuki District. Thanks SMT5 Vengeance for telling me that. The most iconic landmark, the big torii gate at the south end of Tenkaichi Street, is without a doubt the defining symbol of both the real place as well as the fake place. As you can tell, the shape of the gate is slightly different. For what reason, I'm not sure, although the one in-game does look closer to an actual torii gate. The words are different too, but technically denote the same thing. The Kamurocho one says Kamurocho Tenkaichi Street, and the real one says Kabukicho Ichiban-gai. No, not this Ichiban-gai, because it just means First Avenue. The rest of Tenkaichi Street has no landmarks that exist in real life, so I'll come back around to it after I've shown the most important landmarks. Up next is the huge one you can't really miss. The Millennium Tower. Somehow, despite the fact that it's in 15 games, there are very few games where you can freely head inside there, and I think Judgment might be the only game where there is something to interact with, which is its drone racing minigame. Don't know how they let that happen, but based on the various battles held within, the tower hosts just a lot of businessy stuff like offices and restaurants. In real life, the Shinjuku Toho building hosts a movie theater, a few restaurants, it's also a hotel you can stay at, and a Maruhan Pachinko parlor, which is in-game but across the road, which actually is where that parlor used to be. Now, through the power of both loading up old games and also looking at old Google Maps images, the modern day Millennium Tower was actually opened in March of 2015, 10 years, ironically, after Yakuza 1 came out. Prior to that, there was the Shinjuku Koma Theater, which is what the theaters in the old games next to Theater Square were based off of. This building kind of merged into the Millennium Tower in the newer games, but realistically is still there and you can still interact with it. But the real life version of it was demolished in 2009, which for reference is Yakuza 3's release year. I highly doubt that there were people who played the games and thought the idea was so brilliant that they erected their own Millennium Tower, as instead what could have been possible was that the Toho building was in planning for a really long time and Sega knew about this, so they created it virtually for a cool set piece. Or maybe it was all a pure coincidence, which if it was, holy shit. But speaking of those theaters, there's of course Theater Square, which in real life serves as a big open space for events and whatever to be held. In-game, they emulate this by having little pop-ups which don't actually have anything the player can do, but there are some sub-stories and whatever where people perform. Theater Square is another one of the many instances of these games acting as a time capsule. The old design of Theater Square in Yakuza 0, all games before 6, and then all games after 6, was what it was like in real life, give or take a few minor discrepancies. North of the square has always had an arcade, just like real life, but the in-game one is of course a Sega one. Ironically, south of the square now lies a Giga Arcade, which is what Sega arcades became after Sega pulled out of the arcade business a number of years ago. There's also the APA Hotel, which was only in 6, and after 6 became a generic hotel, but it's really cool to know why it was there in the game in the first place. Then of course, off to the west is the bowling alley. Bowling was added in Yakuza 2 as a minigame, but I believe even in Yakuza 1 the building was still the exact same. This building is pretty much the exact same in real life, or at least it was, because it is once again another building that has since been demolished. Surprisingly though, they've never updated this building, and I suspect I know why. But before I elaborate, in-game the bowling alley typically has some fake movie posters on it, and that is because I assume this building used to have movie theaters as well. Even up at the north end of where the Smileburger is now, these little stairs are exactly as they were in real life. Much like how bowling is now dead in this series because the devs hate me, this building was demolished in 2015 and was eventually replaced with VR Zone Shinjuku. So in judgment, when the bowling alley randomly became VR Dice, this was literally the reason why. But when I went here in 2022, they were hard at work at building yet another enormous tower. Known as Kabukicho Tower, this building now sits where the bowling alley once did. Inside, there's a whole host of shit like shops, restaurants, arcades, and they have areas where they host live performances. Unfortunately, I got no footage of the inside because there was some idol group there and there were a bunch of sweaty men blocking me from doing anything, so I just went in there to take a piss and I left. But the reason why this still hasn't appeared in-game is definitely not some legal reason because they just do a parody like they always do, but instead is probably because then there'd be 3 big huge buildings you can't interact with because Kamurocho'S still is a really big paperweight, but it kinda is like the same thing as the real tower anyway. Circling further north, there's no Gender Law Office, but there is the Hotel District, which just has buildings. Nothing special there. However, in-game, there's the Yoshida Batting Center. This exists in real life to a shockingly accurate degree, although it's in a different spot and also a different name. It's just Shinjuku Batting Center. In real life, it's up kinda at the top right corner of what would be the in-game map, but it's an iconic building that's been around for ages and ages. Inside, there's vending machines with cold drinks, there's a host of arcade games from newer ones like Takuno Tatsujin, Tekken 7 and Tekken Tag 2, to much older ones like Metal Slug and a bloody Mahjong arcade game. This honestly was my favorite spot of Shinjuku, which I missed the first time I went, but luckily where I stayed the second time was literally a 5-minute walk away from it, so I visited a few times. Inside the batting cages aren't as modern as they're presented in-game, but it's pretty much as you'd expect. There's even a golf bingo style pitching game where you have to pitch baseballs at targets, which a group of young guys who clearly just got off of work played, and they popped off like crazy when their mate won, so there you go. Now, Australia is not a baseball country like Japan or America. People still play it here, of course, but much like our British and Indian mates, we like to play cricket, which is basically baseball, but it's apparently 100 times easier to hit the ball because I'm shit at cricket, but at least I can hit the bloody thing. I can't really show you my footage of me at the cages, but just know that I suck dick at baseball. Anyway, outside the batting cages there's also something that has been around for a bit now, although I'm not sure for how much longer it'll stay there. It's one of these things. A Majima vending machine. If you didn't know, these have been scattered around Shinjuku and I think Yokohama? I don't know, there's somewhere else too. These just had little merch things related to the 5 characters who got vending machines. So for example, I got a charm keyring and got Daigo's tattoo on it, which I wasn't too pleased by, because all Daigo does is die and go, "Kiryu, help me, ooh!" And also a set of stickers. I never found the Ichiban one, but I managed to find the Saejima and Daigo ones, which were right across from the current Maruhan Pachinko parlor, the Majima one obviously, and the Kiryu one, which is right outside Don Quixote. And hey, speaking of which, exactly where it is in-game is of course the world-famous chain Don Quixote. Real-life Nakamichi Street, which is just called Central Road, is mostly the same structurally. There's a cafe there that I went to that's kind of like real-life Cafe Alps and is in the same place, and it's right next to a Miami Garden which has an Italian flag, so basically it's like the 2 places combined. A bit further north of that is Karaoke-kan, which from Yakuza 6 and onwards is identical to how it is in real life, even down to the placement, and of course it was a huge struggle to not just say karaoke just then, because I'm a disgusting English speaker, but going back to the Don Quixote, it's very accurate in-game to its real-life counterpart. It's even accurate on the inside as well. Don Quixote is a fabulous chain where you can get pretty much anything. I wouldn't even be surprised if you could buy your own Masayoshi Yokoyama. They're also always huge, spanning across many floors with every inch of every floor being coated in all sorts of shit. I kinda hate being in them because of how absurdly cramped they are, and also because of how fucking oblivious people are of their surroundings, I swear to Christ. But of course, as of Yakuza Like a Dragon, this Don Quixote is no longer here, most likely because their deal ran out or because Sega didn't want to pay them, or maybe the other way around, I don't know, but it is still here in real life. Over near the Yagami Detective Agency is that weird castle-like building, which I think was only actually used in Yakuza 3 for that bounty side activity thing. I don't know what this is in real life, I never went to it, but it kinda exists in-game. But beyond that, there's Pink Street and Senryo Avenue, which don't have any landmarks besides this unnamed building, which I don't know what the hell its purpose is in real life or in game, so there you go. For the most part, these areas are pretty accurately recreated though, mimicking the structure and style of the streets. There's also this little alleyway shortcut spot which got replaced by Little Asia in Yakuza 6, although it does still exist in real life, and then right next to it is the road alongside the Millennium Tower. Now unfortunately, I didn't go to Shinjuku Golden Gai, a very old-fashioned, tightly spaced district of bars, which is of course what the Champion District was based off of. It's moved over in-game to fit in the map as it is a bit further away in real life, but for the most part it is very similar in the general feeling to the real-life version. Admittedly, I don't deserve to call myself an Australian for saying this, but I don't drink, so I didn't even really think to go there, but looking around at images in Google Maps, it does look pretty cool. However, a place I did go to is this little car park. It's a car park in real life, and it also has a bunch of posters of allegedly heterosexual men. Across the road in-game is the most goated restaurant of all time, Kanrai, a fancy barbecue restaurant, and in real life, it's not Kanrai, but there is also a fancy barbecue restaurant. Then finally, it's not necessarily a landmark, but many years ago, Gindako Highball Tavern existed in this exact spot and looked exactly like this, and although they weren't in the same place, it was next to a Yoshinoya and a Matsuya, but then weirdly in Yakuza 6 it moved over here next to a Ringer hut. This wasn't for no reason, however, because this is actually the exact location and look of both restaurants in real life. How cool is that? Maybe there were some landmarks that exist in real life that I forgot about, in which case, whoops, but that should be it for well-known spots. There are many differences between the real and fake locations. Some big ones include Little Asia and Kamurocho Hills, which are made up, or the fact that the map is rotated slightly. North in-game is more accurately north-northeast in real life. The scaling is of course very different too, even between the games themselves, which makes sense for gameplay reasons, because if it was accurate, moving around would just be unnecessarily slower. The streets and roads are mostly the same too, but there's a handful of discrepancies here and there. Overall, the real and fake are practically identical. Kamurocho is actually a really fascinating city because of how it acts as a very realistic time capsule of real-life kabukicho. If something looked a certain way in Yakuza 3, then was changed in Yakuza 6, and now looks different in Infinite Wealth, it's very likely that it's because that's what it was like at the time in real life. Even comparing Nakamichi Street now to how it looked in 2009, and 2009 really does just look like Yakuza 3 Kamurocho. It helps too that RGG Studio has a lot of really talented people who are willing to constantly make new posters and signs and ads and all sorts of decorations to help further sell the idea that this is a real city, even down to other details like how the NPCs behave, or more recent games having working escalators and like doors you can open in different ways that are accurate to what those equivalent doors would be like in real life. Kabukicho is an amazing place to visit for Yakuza fans because it really does make you appreciate all the detail they put into these worlds. It's also a great place to visit if you like to drink and have sex or whatever, which obviously I don't do that second one either, but it's also not the only location that these games allow you to explore. Because of course, there's the second most iconic location of these games, Sotenbori, all the way over in Osaka. Now, before I talk about it, I once again have a few things to say. The first is that I only went to Osaka the first time I visited Japan, which was in 2022. Back then, I didn't really think people would have particularly given a fuck about my experience in Japan. I still don't, so I didn't record like anything when I went there, but to get there we hopped on a bullet train, or Shinkansen as they call it, which kind of feels like being on a much more spacious and stable luxurious plane. The footage you're seeing here is a mix of footage I did get from back then, as well as just random train footage I got the second time around. And again, I apologize for the shoddiness. I got the best footage I could out of the window of a train going 10 million kilometers per hour, which again for you Imperials is about 12 miles per hour. Anyway, Sotenbori has a lot of very accurate details, mostly thanks to the fact that a shitload of the real businesses that exist there also appear in most of the games that the city appears in. For example, Don Quixote is exactly where it once was in game. The businesses that advertise themselves on the wall with the running man are mostly there in real life too, and nearly every restaurant on the northern section of Sotenbori is exactly where it is in real life as well. The south side of the in-game city also definitely has some things that have been reinterpreted in-game. For example, the karaoke bar was obviously based off of this building, although it's over towards the equivalent east side in real life. This Queen's Court area in real life is very obviously this place in the Kiwami 2 version of the city, and over here where this Club Zoo is, which funnily enough is a business that appears in the Yakuza games as an ad, is very obviously what the new Club Sunshine building was based off of. The park, which was cut out of Kiwami 2 and put back into Gaiden, I do believe is made up though, which is probably why it was cut from Kiwami 2. I also don't know how long it's been there, but it seems like they recently put up a Gigo arcade in basically the same place as the Sega arcade in game, although maybe it's always been there, I don't know, but now it's right there front and center. Sotenbori is a much more originally designed area compared to Kamurocho, but they have managed to accurately capture the general vibe of the place. However, a big difference between the real and fake place is that for some reason Sotenbori is literally rotated 180 degrees. So north is south and south is north. I also believe that the northern section of Sotenbori is actually all that Dotonbori is, and the other areas are just other areas. I don't know why it's like that, but I can tell you right now, trying to navigate the real place based off of my in-game knowledge was really confusing because I was upside down the whole time. Honestly though, if you want something that actually does a really good job of showing off Dotonbori, watch James May, our man in Japan. He goes there and the whole time I was like, oh my god, I've been there, wow. Now before I move on to the next location, I just want to say that first of all, if you've made it to here, I hope you've been enjoying the video. I've made all sorts of Yakuza videos throughout the years, so subscribe if you want to see more, and I also stream here on YouTube. Lots of people don't know that for some reason. But I also want to say that I only went to Japan for 10 days, which for you Imperial viewers is 10 days, and I only really got footage of what I could of things relevant to these games. I'm only one man and I didn't go on my own, so it would have been very dog if I went to Kabukicho like 8 times. Perhaps if this video does well enough, then maybe if I go to Japan again, I'll try and make a part 2. Or if this video does insanely well, I'll bloody go to Japan again right away, hell yeah. But for now, we come to my favorite place in Japan, and I don't say this as some sort of joke for the video, but it's not because I'm a fan of the games. It's the beautiful city of Yokohama. Now, I've of course not been to everywhere that these games are set, and I have at the very least heard of the accuracy of Infinite Worlds Hawaii, but from my perspective, Yokohama might be the most accurately recreated city in the games. I've been here 2 times as well, once on my first and then the second on my second. And in all honesty, I really wish I went more than once both times. There's so much to see and to do, and especially when comparing it to the games that it's in, there are so many iconic spots that they've portrayed. We'll start though with the main street of in-game Yokohama. Even though there's not much there and you don't really ever have to go there, but in real life it's known as Isazakicho, and it's really long. But again, as with most areas, it has been scaled down. Essentially, various chunks of the streets have been cut out or just squished with other parts, but it's still recognizable enough that you can see exactly where things are in game versus real life. Even down at the end of it, there's the car park and that random little building, as well as Ichiban's storage shed apartment thing from Infinite Wealth, which I didn't get to see because of how incredibly long the road is. Now, it'll take me too long to mention every identifiable spot from the games that appear here in real life, because not gonna lie, it is just kinda everything that stands out in real life was put in game, but I will specifically mention the wet kitchen dinosaur. That thing was technically real, although it looks very different. In real life, it has a chest in its mouth, but then of course has a burger in game. This thing isn't here anymore, or at least it wasn't there when I was last there, and knowing RGG Studio, I can almost guarantee that if the next game has Yokohama in it, it will not have the dinosaur. And the last thing on this street is that the relatively large chemist that's there in game is actually Don Quixote in real life. Like a Dragon was again unfortunately the first game to exclude the brand, but if they did still have their stores in game, I would imagine it would have gone here. Anyway, a little more so than Kamurocho, but definitely less than Sotenbori, the cardinal directions are slightly rotated so that way the street goes from north to south, rather than mostly east to mostly west. But like, that's not really important. It is, however, pretty much the only geographical difference to the real thing. Just across the road from the big sign is the train line, although the station itself is just slightly further down the road. Then I wanted to mention the huge line of bars in Yokohama is also something lovingly recreated from real life. Around this area, like with Survive Bar or other little spots, aren't exactly the same, as again, it's just a lot of scaling down. But this huge line of bars is an iconic destination for people visiting the city. Again, unless you're a little pussy bitch like me, because I'm not really Australian, so I didn't go there. Then I'll head up towards the top right of the map and look at Chinatown. For the most part, the general visual design expertly matches its real life version, but because Chinatown in-game is a heavily compressed version of quite a surprisingly large area, most things are in different placements, or again, just sort of rotated to face different cardinal directions. But I mean, they have stuff like a Gigo arcade, which I assume once was a Sega one. I've been to this spot in real life, but I genuinely can't remember where it actually was. And they even have the restrooms where the secret gambling hall is in Lost Judgment. And across from there is the bar where Soma tells Kaito and Yagami what BBC stands for. I came here the first time I went to Yokohama, and there's a lot of cool things to look at and delicious food to eat, but most importantly, it really goes to show that even though your more stereotypical or traditional Japanese culture is much closer to China's than say, Australian culture, there's still such a unique identity that differentiates the two, making visiting Yokohama's Chinatown a very intriguing experience. I also managed to get to Chinatown from real-life Hamakita Park without the need of a map because of how accurately it is still placed, despite the massive difference in scaling. And speaking of Hamakita Park, possibly my favorite spot I went to both times I came to Yokohama is Yamashita Park. This park, thanks to its lack of copyrightable things in it, is almost one-to-one to how it is in real life. The nature, the fountains, those brick archways, the little, I don't know how to describe it, but like water balcony things, the boat dock, the stairs at the end, the ramps at the other, it's all almost exactly like it is in real life. Even around the park, like the hotel across the road, the spot where you can play VR Dice and Lost Judgment, the spot with the marsh, or what's out on the water, it was all so fascinating to see both times I went because it felt like I knew the place like the back of my hand. Both times I went there at night too, and compared to the typically very bright streets of Tokyo, the lights are very warm and somewhat dull. It's a little hard to see if you're blind as hell like me, but it creates a nice atmosphere, that's for sure. When I went the first time, we got to see the huge real-life Gundam that they did too, which, even though I know nothing about Gundam, was still incredibly cool to see. But the second time I went there were these performers doing sick fire juggling stuff, although they say not to put their performances on YouTube, so here's their name and here's a clip of Ichiban getting set on fire in Infinite Wealth. But we also went when there were a few things on. There was a little concert going on from Yamashita Park, which had a nice vibe to it. There must have been some special bring your dog to the Red Brick Warehouse day because there were beautiful dogs everywhere and it was the best part of the whole trip because I love dogs more than anything. But there was also a special fireworks display. Not a crazy one, but we got to see a beautiful view of it from Yamashita Park. And again, you can check out the video I uploaded that compiles some of my footage in HDR because I think I got some great ambient footage of these fireworks. If you ever do go to Japan, again, not just if you're a Yakuza fan, and you don't visit Yokohama, well, you really need to. To me, it feels very Western in comparison to the rest of the country, which actually creates a very cool contrast. If it weren't for the signs, you could probably convince yourself you are actually somewhere in America or in Sydney or something like that. I've never seen anything directly say this, but I believe that because of its ports being very frequently visited for trade from overseas, the city overall became quite influenced by its visitors. And so the general infrastructure, you know, the roads, the buildings, and the fact that it is, of course, has the very famous Yokohama Chinatown, creates this really fascinating blend of different cultures, which you don't really see all too much of in Greater Japan. The two times I went there, the weather was the loveliest it had been on both my trips. The people there are very friendly, there's lots to see and do, but unfortunately, Ichiban's not real, so I can't go and say hello. But the first time I went, a rather popular place to visit, the Red Brick Warehouse, which I said earlier, was closed for a big bunch of renovations. But the second time, they were back in business. And in there's a lot of nice little novelty gift shops and stuff. Outside, there seems to be pop-up market stalls that people do, and all around, it's a very nice little spot to visit. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because much like how RGG are a bunch of fat ugly bastards for still never making Kamurocho an actual area you can actually go to, they better one day add their section to the games because you can see them. It'd be a cool place to put more shops and minigames and stuff. Whatever. And hopefully one day they also include the final thing I mentioned in Yokohama, the big fat Ferris wheel. I've not been on it, but the first time I went to Yokohama, I did get right up to it. It's pretty big compared to the deceptively smaller in-game ones, but the lights on it look just as cool as they do in real life. Again, placement and scaling is a little different, but you can see it from both the fake and real big parks, and it's yet another lovely little thing Yokohama has to offer. But of course, the areas in the Yakuza games aren't the only places you can visit in Japan. One such place is the famous Shibuya, with its iconic crossing where like 17 roads intersect and literally millions of people cross it every day. Shibuya is a place you'll likely recognize if you've played the beloved Atlas title, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which took me 8,000 tries to just say that just then, where there are a number of equipment and item stores available for you to browse. But in real life, there are likely thousands of shops for you to visit, but I was fortunate enough to visit one special place on its opening day. That's right, it's the new Sega store in the Shibuya Parko. And saying that I went there on the day it opened really goes to show how long ago this trip was, because I came back and was uber busy, but I went during summer over there and it was hot as shit and terrible, and it sucks compared to the beautiful winter we were having here in the southern hemisphere, because winter is better than summer, it's not even a competition. But anyway, the Sega store is something they opened recently that has various handfuls of Sega and Atlas related merch. So they've got SMT, Sonic, Hatsune Miku, and of course, Yakuza. I managed to grab an Ichiban figure on the first day, and then because it was one per customer, I secretly came back another day, and unfortunately they only had shirtless Majima and Ichiban left. So I got shirtless Majima and Nahabino from SMT, but no Kiryu. And while these things aren't places, there's a few more interesting little novelties of the Japanese world that I wanted to show. The first was their iconic vending machines that they have quite literally everywhere. Unfortunately, most likely because it was summer, a lot of them had marked up prices for their products compared to when I was last here, but pretty much any corner you turn around, you'll be greeted by a bunch of nice and refreshing drinks for 100 to roughly 170 yen. They have a 100 milliliters less than their drink bottles compared to us in Australia, but 100 yen is roughly an Australian dollar, and that's like a fifth of the price that we pay down here for the same shit. They are a lifesaver, and of course vending machines aren't unique to Japan, but the way that they're laid out and decorated in the Yakuza games, even down to the selection of the drinks and brands like Asahi or of course Suntory and Boss Coffee, is very lifelike. Yakuza 6 allowed you to grab a drink from a vending machine and physically drink it, which I can understand why they changed it in Kiwami 2 to just add it to your inventory, but that was a really cool little feature. There's also another little dispensing machine you can interact with in the Yakuza games, and that's the definitely works as intended UFO catchers. I didn't get any footage of these this time though, and there's a very good reason for that. You see, in the games, they just have little plushies and stuff. No biggie, that's what our skill cranes are like down here too. But many arcades in Japan will have entire floors dedicated to just a shitload of these things, and the prizes range from little glue bits you can attach to your bag or something, to sick Dragon Ball figures and more pricey accessories. And they're usually just 100 yen a try, or even multiple tries. But down here, they'll just have a bunch of cheap, shitty, like Mario toys that make his hat pink and give him the wrong mustache, and each try will be like $4 or $5, just for the claw to somehow conveniently loosen its grip right as it reaches the top of the machine. So how do they afford to have so many machines with so many valuable items with the potential of a skillful player to come by and just nab these prizes with only a single coin's worth of money? Well, it's because these fucks are somehow more rigged than the ones we've got down here. I never even bothered looking at any the second time, because when I went the first time, the claws will just straight up open all the way back up and drop the thing, and then have the audacity to go over to the bin where it was supposed to drop the thing it just had the tightest grip on 2 seconds ago. Speaking of arcades though, Japan is also known for their arcades. Prior to pulling out, one of the big dogs of the arcade industry was, of course, Sega. Now, down here in Australia, we don't really have many arcades, and if we do, it's a lot of either practical games like throwing things at shit or chucking basketballs, or a lot of blatant gambling games where you get tickets instead of money. You know, because why not? So heading to a Japanese arcade and seeing so many arcade games where the purpose is to just have fun, rather than to win a prize or get tickets, is really cool. But you know, they also have blatant gambling machines. I mean, some arcades have entire floors dedicated to these, and it's a bunch of middle-aged men forking a shitload of money on fake horse races. It's actually a serious problem. Japan, how are you worse than us? Anyway, there's a lot of arcade games they have over there that don't ever get released outside of Japan, such as a lot of Mahjong arcade games. I guess it really is popular over there. But one spot I visited that I'm very glad I did was the Akihabara Gigo Arcade, which sadly has now shut down. And towards the top end, they had Dance Live. Turns out it's actually a Sega subsidiary, so it makes sense that Dance Live always manages to show up in the Yakuza games. And damn is it cool. Once again, 100 yen per game, but you can make those games go as long as you want, and the machines have all kinds of cool features where you can set up a profile and it'll track your stats and give you graphs and stuff. I've played darts like twice in my life, so I was also trash at this, but far out, I wouldn't mind going back there just for this one particular feature. These machines have online multiplayer. I didn't get footage of it, but some of the people next to me were playing online with complete strangers wherever they were. And the machines, like they sort of show in the games, they have these cameras, so we could see these people in some bar somewhere getting completely destroyed by our guy here at the arcade. It was seriously such a blast to play on these machines, and I'd highly recommend you visit somewhere that has a Darts Life machine if you ever go there. And mostly thanks to doing months and months of research for this specific video, I have now become so insanely brain rotted because everywhere I look there'd be some business that shows up at the Yakuza games that I'd recognize. It of course further adds to the authenticity of the games to have signs for these real businesses and whatnot, but something I really appreciated was the portrayal of some of the real restaurants. I mentioned earlier how the Gindako and Ringer Hut and Kamurocho are exactly as they are in real life, but many of the other restaurants still are authentically recreated, even though they're just there for advertising purposes. I visited a Pronto one morning for breakfast because we were too early for our train, so we just stopped by and it was pretty good. The people I was with said the coffee was actually good because Japan apparently really like bitter coffee, which I also don't drink coffee. Apparently I don't drink fucking anything, but the vibe, the atmosphere, the aesthetics choices of how it is in the games compared to this one random Pronto and wherever it was, it felt like I was back in the PS3 area, only now with some like bacon egg toast thing, which was actually, it was really tasty, I won't lie. I also stopped by the Nandai Fujisoba across from that arcade for dinner one night, and god damn! It was actually really freaking good. But it's one of those restaurants where you have to use a machine to get a ticket of what you want, and then you go up and grab your food, just like in the games it appears in. That extra little layer of making you walk up to the machine, like they could have just made you walk to the NPC and just talk to them at the front, or not even have allowed you to step inside and just have a menu and you interact with. But these devs just always put in that extra step to make these things feel as real as possible. And I could talk all day about my time over there and how it compares to my lovely little home of bogans and spiders, but then I just have an endless video and I don't want to edit that. But I will talk about one last place, which was my second most highlighted highlight, behind Yokohama, of course. Now, like with any good content creator, I am of course going to gatekeep this place. Where I went was a top secret, small suburban city towards the west end of Saitama Prefecture. It's about 2 hours by train from Tokyo. It's called Chichibu, and compared to the loud, busy streets of Tokyo, it's quiet, it's old, but most importantly, it wasn't very busy. And again, it was hot as shit. So hot in fact that everywhere I looked I could see the heat haze shadow. There's not really much to do there for tourists besides sightseeing. It's not really a touristy place. There's a famous bridge from some anime my brother keeps telling me to watch, and generally the whole area has that sort of going to visit my grandparents in the summer anime arc feeling, or, you know, Persona 4. But it was a really refreshing change of pace from the touristy areas I'd been to. Didn't have to walk amongst crowds of people, I could sit down and I wasn't told to piss off, and a big thing too was that because there weren't any loud Americans being loud, my reputation as a white person was not ruined. So everyone there was just so lovely. Everyone greets you with a big smile, people don't look at you like you're diseased, and when there's a language barrier problem, there's no anger, there's no frustration, there's just laughter. If you want a contrast from all the high-tech, fast-moving action you're used to in the popular areas of Japan, well, this I think is definitely a lovely place to visit. But you see, it made me appreciate most of all, not just the beauty of Japan, and not comparatively the beauty of my own home, but the beauty of the whole world. Japan isn't a fascinating place because it's Japan, but instead it's because it's one of the many places millions of people have shaped over thousands of years to create something that they can comfortably call home. It's different from my home, it might be different from yours, but I still feel a sense of pride as a human being to see that no matter how far apart we may be, no matter how different our languages may be, no matter how we look or act or think, we all still collectively, wholeheartedly understand that Americans are really fucking annoying. But anyway, that concludes the video. Once again, the Yakuza games do such a fabulous job at creating convincingly real worlds within their games, and seeing how they've handled Hawaii makes me excited with the hope that one day they expand their reaches and give us real, living, breathing tastes of the whole world. Again, I hope you subscribe and like the video and do the hype points thing. I don't know how it works, but it's a thing. Look at the subscribe button, it's gonna glow. Click subscribe. See that? See it glow? I'll probably tell more stories about my trips and streams and the like, if you're interested, of course. Don't know when they'll be though. At the time of recording this, my internet has been terrible, so I apologize. And if you're dreaming, planning, or going to Japan and want some travel advice from yours truly, don't go when it's fucking hot.